Hello viewers, my name is Ronwise Ganji, and welcome to Quick and Dirty Roleplaying. In this episode, I'd like to talk about being stuck while GMing. While other tabletop RPG channels may approach this subject matter with advice about having sufficient prep in order to minimize the chances of finding yourself having a moment or more of brain fart, I'm going to take a different perspective on this. Whenever I start a gaming session as the GM, I collaborate with my players on a quest starter or an adventuring hook. In the first session, this quest starter incorporates broad stroke setting elements that we've established as well as the player's motivations and goals. From the second session onwards, quest starters build upon the way the narrative has developed from prior sessions, as well as any changes to player motivations or goals. In essence, there's more than enough material to work with on what to do each session without having to plan something between sessions. Even then, however, I find myself having a loading screen moment more often than I would like, and this may happen to you as a game master. I think that part of that has to do with the phenomenon known as paralysis by analysis. I'm an overthinker by nature, as well as a begrudging perfectionist, so this paralysis by analysis is a common occurrence for me in my daily life. It's especially a struggle for me when I think about what I want to accomplish as a GM. I found that a solution that works for me is to direct my attention away from my internal dialogue to having an actual dialogue with one or more players. The next question is, what do I ask or tell my players? In instances where I don't know what to present next, I ask them how they want to go about accomplishing the objective set in the quest starter. For me, this is where the action is, and that's what I and my players have established as the focus of the narrative. I don't even elaborately describe the group's sense experiences of the scene in anything more than pretty basic details or by analogy to some other source of media unless it's relevant to the task at hand. That's not a judgment on my part for GMs who do that. I'm actually quite envious of that quality, and I think it would be great if it were in me to do that, but it's not something I have an inclination to do, and typically pass the buck on to players in that regard. Hey, we all have our strengths and shortcomings. Anyways, after my players tell me how they want to go about accomplishing their ultimate objective, that's when I ask them to break down their plan, kind of like if they were describing the details of a heist. During this time, I jot down each step in a bullet point manner. If there's a part in their plan that is nebulous, or if their plan just seems very simplistic, as in too few steps or some steps that are way too all-encompassing, I take note of that as areas where I could introduce more monkey wrenches. One important point to keep in mind when I do this is for me not to get caught up in the weeds, so to speak. If a certain part of the plan seems somewhat cagey, I make it a point to not be overly harsh on them by imposing a penalty that makes it all but impossible to succeed even halfway, simply because that player's way of thinking differs from mine. A huge part of the satisfaction of a tabletop RPG is trying things out in an imaginary world that you're unable to do in a video game or a board game. In situations like that, I point out that the consequences of not getting a clean success or of outright failure can be very painful if it would make sense of the narrative. But they're free to try out their unorthodox plan. If a player who is scrapping unorthodox plans because they think of ways why they won't work, I remind them not to use their intelligence against themselves in that manner and to trust that we can work something out, because this is a collaborative hobby, not a competitive one. Through this process of the back and forth with my players, I find that ideas just start to come to mind regarding content that I can use in the moment. If worst comes to worst, however, I'm running dry on the creativity department, I'll simply ask my players what would make sense for there to be or for there to happen in this area. That's a de facto admission of absence of content, but I see that as an earnest attempt of a GM to elicit the help of their players for the benefit of the group. I also see that as an endearing quality for a GM to have, regardless of skill, because GMs are people, and there's a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. They're not gaming consoles that you can activate with the press of a power button, ready to load content at the demands of the players. If this is something that a player doesn't understand or appreciate, let them try their hand at GMing once or twice to see how smoothly and adaptable they run their game. To recap, being stuck in the moment while GMing has to do with your mind attending to the past or the future. Engaging with your players with questions about their plans requires you to be in the present moment, which is where you need to be, not only to do your job as a GM, but where you'll do your job at its best, because a huge part of GMing is in active listening. Your moments of reprieve will be where you're jotting down notes during the session so you can access them at a moment's notice while reducing the amount of clutter in your head. Treat GMing as a collaborative effort, not a solo activity. And that's about all I have to say about this subject matter. So if you like this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If there are other facets you'd like me to explore regarding this subject, please leave me a comment and keep it respectful. Take care, folks, and play to find out what happens.